They didn't exile her. They erased her, quietly. Neatly. Like wiping a name off a chalkboard, pretending it had never been there at all. Natalie Brooks wasn't disowned. She was unspoken. No family scandal. No slamming doors. Just a slow disappearance, one that bled into birthdays, holidays, and every family photo where her smile used to be. Her name didn't stir anger anymore. It stirred silence. And silence, in a family like hers, meant only one thing. She didn't belong. Not anymore. Most people believe Natalie's downfall happened at Westmore Military Academy, after just 1 year. That's the story they passed around. She couldn't handle it. Said with a shrug, as if the disappointment had aged into a dull truth. No one ever asked why. Not her mother. Not her father. Certainly not her younger brother. The truth. She never quit. She was recruited into a program so classified it demanded more than secrecy. It demanded absence, identity, even erasure. And years later, she didn't return to win back their acceptance. She came back for one reason only: to tell the truth. They called it a sabbatical, a graceful way to vanish. No graduation photos, no goodbyes, just a closed door and a cold directive. You'll speak of this to no one. She was 22. While her peers chose dress uniforms and posed for proud pictures with beaming parents, Natalie was handed a burner phone, one suitcase, and a warning that echoed louder than any farewell. If you ever need to be found, you failed. That marked the start of her descent into the grey. The space between duty and denial. A world where names held no value, only results. Natalie never stopped serving. But she did disappear. She planned missions from damp cellars, wrote directives on torn wrappers, and tied field dressings from curtain strips in homes reduced to whispers and rubble. She held trembling hands as civilians bled out, whispering last words beneath roaring skies. None of it ever made headlines. But back home, the silence hardened. The myth became truth. Natalie left. Natalie broke. Natalie quit. And Natalie let them believe it. Because you can't correct a lie from behind a locked door. And she hadn't been invited home in years. Micah's promotion ceremony wasn't held in some modest hall or dusty base parade ground. It took place in a gleaming auditorium outside Dallas. Polished wood floors, spotless brass, and rows of uniforms that shimmered under the stage lights, like medals desperate to outshine the truth. Natalie arrived alone, unannounced. No one had expected her. Or perhaps they had just hoped she wouldn't come. Her name wasn't on the seating chart. A weary-looking staff sergeant pointed her to a seat in the back, tucked behind junior officers and their fidgeting children. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, ID still warm from the checkpoint. Up front, Micah was in his element, working the room like a seasoned politician. His smile was wide, calculated. He hugged generals as if they were old classmates, kissed babies like he was already on a ballot. When his eyes finally caught hers, it wasn't surprise that flickered there. It was strategy. He straightened his collar, nodded coolly, and offered a quick introduction to a colonel's wife. "This is my sister," he said, light and dismissive. "She used to be in the service. Works in admin now, I think." A polite smile, a passing chuckle, and then he walked away. The room did too. Along the corridor, photo displays told the story they wanted. Micah in uniform, Micah with medals. Micah with their mother, teary-eyed and proud. Not a single image held Natalie, not even a shadow. A cousin in uniform passed by, blinked twice, and muttered, "Didn't think you were allowed at these things anymore." Natalie's reply sliced sharper than glass. I go where I choose. She poured herself black coffee at the buffet. A young lieutenant offered cream and pointed toward Micah. My brother's a big deal, huh? She nodded faintly, watching Micah soak up attention like sunlight. Light that never seemed to reach her. She wasn't there to outshine. She only wanted to see if any of them could finally look her in the eye and see what they had so comfortably forgotten. Then something changed. A stillness rolled through the room. Conversations hushed. Backs straightened. Someone, shifted the air. Major General Elias Samuels had entered. No fanfare, no announcement, just presence. Each step echoed off the floor like a countdown. Heads turned, people parted. He scanned the room the way soldiers scan for threats, in half blinks and breathless pauses. And then he saw her. He stopped, raised a brow, and in a move that split the moment wide open, he walked straight toward her. Gasps scattered like sparks. Whispers lit the air. Is he? That can't be for her. But it was. He stopped, squared his shoulders, and offered a crisp salute. Ma'am, he said, steady and sharp. General Brooks, it's an honor to see you again. Natalie didn't flinch. She stood and returned the salute, not as ceremony, but as declaration, not shrinking, not apologizing. Two officers, forged by fire, saluting what no one else in that room could name. Behind her, a glass shattered. Micah froze mid-sentence. His mouth opened, but no words came. His hands trembled, and he looked at her, not as a sister, but as something unreal. As if a ghost had stepped out of a battlefield myth. Now the crowd stared. At her, and at everything she represented. A question, unspoken but heavy. What else had they been wrong about? Natalie didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She let the silence stretch, let it breathe. General Samuels gave a respectful nod, then returned to his seat. But nothing returned to normal. The axis had shifted, and for the first time in that polished room, Natalie Brooks wasn't orbiting anyone. Later that night, long after the applause had faded and the tables were cleared of nameplates and lukewarm coffee, Natalie returned to the guest quarters assigned to her by the base. The room was sterile. Beige walls, stiff bedding, and a faint hum from the ceiling light that seemed louder with every second. She peeled off her jacket, folded it with practiced care, and there, sitting square in the center of the desk, was a manila envelope. No label, no handwriting, no seal. Just there, as if it had always belonged to the furniture. She didn't hesitate. She opened it. Inside, a printed email thread, a chain she had never seen before. Subject line: Unauthorized operation, civilian casualties. The content accused a Colleen W. of leading an unsanctioned mission that resulted in multiple non-combatant deaths. Natalie read the wording once, then again. It was too exact, too familiar, nearly identical to a classified after-action report she had reviewed years ago in Stuttgart. Only 3 people had ever seen that report: herself, the lead analyst, and a junior officer with just enough clearance to skim the edges of truth. Her brother. The timeline fit. She remembered the review, quiet, internal, dismissed as routine anomaly detection. She'd believed them back then, but now she knew better. Someone had reached into the ash of a forgotten rumor and repackaged it for destruction. She held the page, the edges still warm from the lamplight, as a quiet chill blossomed in her chest. The next morning, she found Micah behind the officer's tent, pacing, phone pressed to his ear. He spotted her before she spoke. His eyes narrowed, his jaw locked, like a man already bracing for the hit. She held up the printout, Did you send this? He didn't feign confusion. He simply paused, calculating, then nodded. Yes. Silence. Why? She asked. Micah looked down. His voice was flat, brittle. Because you weren't supposed to win. Natalie stared at him. He kept going. You left. You didn't stay and build. You don't get to come back and still be more. The ache that followed wasn't anger. It was clarity. Sometimes betrayal didn't come in the form of bullets. It came dressed as blood. Leaking classified material is a criminal offense, she said, calm as steel. Micah said nothing. His jaw tightened, and Natalie turned away before she could decide whether she still loved him or just remembered she once did. She didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, but because something didn't fit. Micah's betrayal felt personal, yes, but sloppy. Emotional. Not the kind of surgical strike that unearths a redacted op file at the exact moment a career hangs in the balance. No. That took more than bitterness. That took guidance. By sunrise, she was back in the command center. Clearance still unlocked doors, even when trust didn't. She requested full digital trace logs tied to the anonymous email. The cybertech blinked, but didn't question. An hour later, the truth was in her hands. The email wasn't sent directly. It had been funneled through an encrypted relay server, bounced off a dormant backup system once used to archive NATO campaign logs, a system supposedly decommissioned 5 years ago. Supposedly. But when the message passed through, it triggered an old auto-backup, one that reattached a dormant, top-clearance file. The breach wasn't just Micah. Someone had known exactly how to spring the trap. She traced the login credentials. What she saw made her blood cool like steel. The access came from a device registered to Deborah Flynn. Natalie hadn't heard that name in years. They'd once been equals. Strategists, they trained together, sparred over doctrine. Flynn was brilliant, ambitious, always 2 steps behind. Natalie had beaten her once in Ramstein. Again, in Kiev. Flynn had smiled through each loss, but Natalie remembered her last words clearly. You're not better than me, just better liked. She hadn't thought about it since. But apparently Deborah had. Flynn had no official rank now, but she hadn't disappeared. She'd cycled through advisory roles, stayed near base networks, and worse, she'd stayed near people like Micah. It clicked. He hadn't engineered the breach. He'd been used, weaponized, a brother turned into a Trojan horse, not to ruin him, but to ruin Natalie through someone who bore her last name. And it almost worked, because betrayal wrapped in family cuts the deepest and breaks the cleanest. She stared at the access logs. Still warm on the screen, Deborah Flynn hadn't vanished. She'd just gone underground. Like all good saboteurs do. Natalie walked straight into General Samuel's office, a sealed file clenched in hand, exhaustion hidden beneath the calm precision on her face. The general didn't ask why she had come. He simply gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. The silence between them was steeped in years of military service, a silence that didn't need explaining. They both understood what the file meant. And they both knew nothing about this was going to be clean. I want to lead the internal investigation, Natalie said, her tone plain and immovable. Not just because I have the clearance, but because I have the context, and the reason no one else has. Samuels didn't speak right away. He stood, slowly rounded the desk, and extended a hand. Then the floor is yours, General Brooks. Just like that, she was back in. The briefing room that morning felt colder than usual. Or maybe it was just the people in it. Seated at the long table were her father, Colonel Richard Brooks, retired, revered, and unbending. Her mother, Vanessa, a former field medic with a stare sharper than scalpels. And Micah, silent, shoulders drawn, eyes carefully avoiding hers. "This isn't a punishment," Natalie began. Her voice didn't waver. "This is a reckoning. For all of us." Her father opened with a clipped report on prior data breaches. His tone was detached, mechanical, like reading an obituary for a system long dead. He never lifted his gaze. Then came Micah. His briefing was methodical, technical. Network logs, routing paths, timestamps. But not once did he name himself, though every log pointed directly to him. Her mother spoke last. She reviewed the physical traces, dust, fingerprints, BIOS activity. Her voice cracked only once. "This wasn't done by someone careless," she said. "It was done by someone who knows exactly what people miss when they stop paying attention." No one interrupted. No one offered comfort. Natalie watched her own family unravel a crime born not from malice, but from neglect, from ambition, from years of silence slowly curdling into poison. But she wasn't here for catharsis. She was here for truth. They combed through 3 years' worth of server snapshots, login caches, and remote backups, and then, like a bruise rising to the surface, the anomaly emerged. A Trojan. Planted 6 years earlier, buried inside a logistics file so routine no one had opened it since. Its fingerprint didn't match Micah's. It was older, sharper, and unmistakably familiar. It belonged to someone who once walked the same war rooms as Natalie. Someone who'd worn the same uniform, but never earned the same trust. Natalie found her standing exactly where she'd expected. On the far edge of the observation deck, gazing across the deserted drill field like it still whispered something sacred. Deborah Flynn didn't flinch when Natalie approached. She didn't speak, didn't turn. Just let the wind pull at her coat as if she'd become part of the elements, no longer part of the institution. Natalie stopped beside her, close enough to speak, far enough to avoid her shadow. "You always preferred high ground," she said quietly. Deborah smirked, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "Easier to watch people rise above you, from up here." Her voice was colder now. Blunt, the voice of someone who had stopped caring about being understood long ago. "I traced the breach," Natalie said. "Your access path, your login. You didn't just help trigger the Trojan. You planted it." Deborah didn't deny it. She just sighed, like the weight of being discovered was almost a relief. "You know what it's like," she murmured. "To be the almost, the second best. To do everything right and still never quite glow." Natalie studied her. Weathered, worn, but not broken. "You think that justifies dragging my career through the mud?" she asked. Not with anger, but with fatigue. Deborah finally turned, met Natalie's gaze. "Long enough to almost lose her career. But I'd make that same call again," she told them. "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here to remind us. Leadership isn't about volume, it's about responsibility." The room didn't erupt, it held quiet. Out of respect. Because every soldier in that room knew there's a difference between giving orders and carrying truth. Then she stepped aside, gestured toward the smaller lectern. "I've asked someone else to close today's session," she said. "Someone who taught me that failure and forgiveness aren't opposites. They're siblings." Micah rose, his steps unsure but full of intent. "I used to think strength meant being the loudest," he said. "But maybe it means being the first to listen, especially to those we think we already understand." The applause came gently, not for her, not for him, but for what they'd both chosen to become. Afterward, he handed her a small notebook. 3 words were handwritten across its cover. "Sister." "General, guide." She didn't cry, but she held it like something sacred. Because it was Sometimes, the most powerful redemption isn't loud. It's shared in silence, over meals, or through a single act of listening. If this story moved you, let it echo. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And stay with us for the next story that reminds us what really matters.